Welcome to KBA's Vendor Viewpoint podcast, where we bring together Kentucky bankers and the industry's top vendor solutions to discuss important topics that affect your bank. This is Selena Parrish, KBA Director of Membership, Products and Services. It's Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and an international initiative that educates everyone about online safety and empowers individuals and businesses to protect their data from cybercrime. Today, we are featuring KBA-endorsed ImageQuest. With me today is Milton Bartley, co-founder, president, and CEO of ImageQuest, and Sammy Jo Scott, Director of Advisory Services. Thank you both for being with us today. Milton, Sammy Jo, please tell our audience about how ImageQuest is assisting KBA members with cybersecurity to talk with their employees and customers about staying safe online.
You got it. Thank you so much, Selena. We always appreciate this opportunity to talk to the bankers in Kentucky. And Sammy Jo and I are very happy to have this opportunity in October. As you said, it's Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and we're hearing so much about cybersecurity, both in the news and, of course, every vendor under the sun is sending us a reminder and their spin on it. There's also a lot of Halloween kind of influx there. We're doing some things like fish or treat and some other fun things that we're hearing out there. But here's what's interesting. When Sammy Jo and I work with our banks, whether they're Kentucky banks or other banks, we're really thinking and talking about something much broader than just cybersecurity. We're thinking about something called information security. And for some people, probably lay folks, they don't see the distinction. But let me toss it over to you, Sammy Jo. What's the first question you usually get when we interface with a new bank client?
Yeah, whether it is a prospect or we are having that initial meeting with a new client, many of our organizations are saying we need better cybersecurity. But what they often need, or what regulators or auditors are looking for, are for these institutions to have a solid, comprehensive information security program.
Yeah, information security. And that is a big distinction. So when you want to meet with whether it's the leadership at a bank or whether it's a board or whomever we're interfacing with, how do you explain the difference in the relationship between information security and cybersecurity?
So you're going to laugh because I've thought a lot about this over the years. And, information security is all about the documentation. And I think my team is probably tired of hearing if it's not documented, then we don't have a good information security program. But in reality, information security is such a broad term, and it covers more than just a client's IT stack. It covers things like policies and procedures and a bank's governance structure. So, what does that look like? Is it a management committee that flows into a board level committee that ultimately goes up to the board of directors? Or is it more simple than that? Is it just a management team that is meeting periodically and having these conversations around IT and information security, and then those notes get shared with the board? And all of those things are okay. It's just understanding what that governance structure is. But it also touches on areas like people and the technology and vendor management, third-party risk. That is a hot topic right now. Business continuity, another hot topic. Do you have that business impact analysis? Do you have an incident response plan? And so, all of these things, what they have in common, it's the documentation. And so that's the best way for me to explain information security as a broader term, whereas cybersecurity is more technical. It focuses on the client's digital assets. So think firewalls, think encryption, think vulnerability management. And so those are the things that are more cybersecurity because it's the technical piece. But at the end of the day, it all rolls up under that information security umbrella.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of things there, Sammy Jo, that really hit home for me. And I think about they're buzzwords, but they're important buzzwords. You talked about governance. I think you used the word framework. And when we think about what regulators are asking, and if you're looking at your FFIEC manuals, your audit manuals, and all of your management manuals, they refer to an information security program, right? They don't refer to a cybersecurity program. And cybersecurity is critical. It's a critical subset of information security. But I think, what most people say when they say I need better cybersecurity, what they really mean to say is I need better information security, but they don't necessarily get the nuance difference. And so I appreciate you laying that out there. And we talked about this, in detail a little bit in preparation for this podcast. And I think, again, you came up with some of the good ones. The one that really jumps out at me, though, and you talked about people. What is the people part of your information security program? Because as you noted, it's documentation, right? We can have the really, really well-written policies. We can have an excellent risk assessment. We can even have all the right cybersecurity tools. But at the end of the day, we still have to trust our people to make the right decision with that information, with that data, whether it's paper sitting on my desk, whether it's paper that's supposed to go in the shred box and I threw it in the trash can by mistake, or whether I left it, sitting on the printer and didn't go pick it up, or I took it home with me when it's not supposed to leave the bank. Those are all things that we don't think of as cybersecurity, but they're absolutely critical to our information security. So there you go.
Absolutely. Milton, why do you think the distinction of information security and cybersecurity matters so much for our banks?
Well, great question, Sammy Jo. And I think it's really about what the regulators are looking for. So I mentioned that the regulators they're asking about information security. Their guidance is all written around information security. And then we also have other compliance frameworks that we fall under, right? So we're also fall under the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, or GLBA, and that is about information security and the privacy of data. It doesn't matter if it's digital data or not. But that critical subset and where we're going to see people get in trouble, it's almost always going to be with some form of a digital aspect to it, right? Is it a business email compromise because I clicked on a phishing link or opened up an attachment from an unknown sender that I shouldn't have done? Or is it a phishing email where I get this voicemail and it sounds critical and I call the number back that they left on my voicemail and I think I'm calling, a legitimate customer or vendor, and in reality, I'm talking to a bad actor, or is it like a true brute force attack where someone got into my system through the firewall or whatever that may be? Those are all things that we care about. So, kind of think of it this way. A bank can have the best firewalls, endpoint protection, vulnerability management, all these great tools, right? These tangible tools that I can point to, touch, watch the flashing lights. And I can still fail an exam or fail an audit because I don't have a properly documented governance program. And then conversely, I can have a miraculously well-written policy program, risk assessments, all the right paper, great administrative information security program, but have a data incident in my organization because people didn't follow those policies. I didn't test people. I have this great incident response plan, but I didn't test it, or I didn't test it correctly, wherever that may be. So yeah, that's why I think we have to understand the difference. You have to do both. And you need two teams of people. I think too often what happens, Sammy Jo, and tell me if you agree with this, whether it's a bank or somebody else, but we're talking to bankers today, they see information security and they just say, oh, throw that over to the IT department. And they dump that on whoever is running IT, whether it's a CIO or a head of IT. I mean, are you seeing the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we walk in and we start these engagements, I think that's why it's always key for us that we like to have the technical resource, but we also like to have someone that understands the policies, the documentation behind it, the why, the governance. And I think that's what's worked really well is for us to have the right people in the room from both sides. Because you get the technical resources are not always going to understand what's in your policies. And that's, I think that's there. It's key. We've got to have both resources in the room for this to work. And I think we've seen that time and time again.
Yeah, really well said. And I'll say this, and then I got another question for you. So I think we've both seen, and we won't name any banks here, but we've both seen banks where we've walked in, gotten to know them, met with them, worked with them, and their information security program is actually pretty solid. We might be making a few tweaks to it, but the program is pretty solid, yet they've had incidents, more than one in some cases. And that's because of the cybersecurity and the training and the people aspect of this, right? So really good administrative, not as great at the people and the training piece. And then we've seen the opposite where, they're locked up tight, man. Their IT department has this thing locked down and they get it, and they don't let you do anything inside the organization. But then you go look at their program and it's woefully out of date and inadequate. And they hadn't been challenged by whoever the regulator or auditor is to improve that. We've seen both ends of that spectrum, and so it's just so critical to do both. So thinking about that, new customers, we've got several new customers just this month. So when you conduct your assessment and your team goes in to do a bank, what are the gaps you're seeing? What are the most common things you're seeing that are missing?
That's a good question. When we start a new engagement, we have that initial kickoff meeting. And in that meeting, we cover the general information, right? So IT stack, which we've covered, we've addressed the IT stack because it is a critical component of the information security program. We want to understand who their core provider is and what mortgage and LOS system they're using, and what the audit and exam schedule is. But in that same meeting, we also ask the question, what's keeping the client up at night? What's the top 3 things that where they want us to direct our focus? And all of that is different, right? In some cases, they're going to say, hey, it's been a while since we've looked at our policies. We'd really like for you to start there. Or it's been a couple of years since we've looked at our business impact analysis. It's really outdated. We need some help there. And not only does that help us prioritize our focus, but it also gives us some insight into where they think their weaknesses are. And in the next couple of meetings, we have what we call a QA session, and it takes 2 meetings, 3 meetings to really get through that. But it gives us an opportunity to have a deeper dive into processes, really understand the client environment, the client's culture. And while it's not a formal risk assessment, it is a complete, comprehensive review, an assessment of the client's environment to give us that complete picture of where we're starting. And you mentioned it, in a lot of cases, everyone's got their documentation. Those are things they have to have. So we're typically not starting from scratch, and we can't bite everything off at once. So we have to figure out where to prioritize our time. And so through these conversations, I feel like we've identified things like overinvestment in technology. Mm-hmm. Perfect example. Vulnerability management scanning tool, right? Maybe it's too robust for the environment. Maybe they don't have enough internal people to review those vulnerabilities, remediate those vulnerabilities. So, what tool could we put in place that would make more sense? Something that would actually fit that environment to give them that cybersecurity function, that component that they need to meet regulations. We've identified gaps in policy. Maybe they're missing a couple of policies. Maybe policies are too detailed, right? Maybe it's too much policy and procedure, and maybe we need to pull that procedure information out so that we can be more consistent in our policy documentation, and we can update our procedure separately, right? You mentioned the people aspect and how critical that is. What does that training look like? Are we completing annual training? Have we been using the same training for the last couple of years and it's not been updated? Do we have a phishing schedule? Is that periodic? Are we running those monthly? I think in today's world, in today's industry, that what we've seen is those phishing exercises are critical to an information security program. It gives us that baseline, who's clicking, what are they clicking on? And then you can build your training program around that. So that we can get the users what they need. And so those are a couple of examples of what we've identified in just those initial conversations and completing those initial assessments, and really just building that roadmap, figuring out where we're going to start and what we need to work on, and understanding that we can't do everything in the first 6 months. It's going to take time to really review and assess and mature the overall information security program.
You hit on another key point there, Sammy Jo, and that's an excellent overview. But you talked about, and we've walked into these banks, and I know kind of which banks you're talking about, where they bought tools, right? And they can go to their board, and they can go to leadership, and they can even go to their auditor and say, look, we bought this tool, XYZ tool, to do vulnerability management or whatever that may be. And then when you really look under the hood, what you realize is nobody knows how to use the tool the way the tool is supposed to be used, right? They knew how to deploy it, they knew how to get it installed, but they don't know the actual process behind it. So, hey, we get this great monthly report now. Okay, what do you do with the report? Oh, I didn't know we were supposed to do anything with the report. Or, oh my gosh, we didn't realize we had 1,000 vulnerabilities, and that's not an unrealistic number for an organization. Now we don't know what to do with 1,000 vulnerabilities. So you're almost better off sometimes not knowing than you are knowing and not doing anything about it. And an auditor and an examiner will actually tell you the same thing. Yes, you need these tools, but you also need a process behind the tools. I think that's a critical distinction.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me when we walk into these organizations is to make sure that we've got that solid foundation. So we've got our documentation, we've completed our initial risk assessment, right? So I know that they've been completing risk assessments, but our risk assessment that gives us that complete picture, so that, we can start to dig into some of these areas deeper, right?
Yeah, a lot of times, Sammy Jo, you said it again. We see a risk assessment that the auditors and the examiners have looked at every year or every 18 months or whenever that frequency is, and it gives them some kind of a risk score, right? Oh, my risk score is X or my risk score is Y. But doesn't really give you anything to go work on, right? It doesn't tell you where to start this journey. It just says, oh, you've got a score of X. Well, compared to what? What does that mean? It's green, yellow, red. Oh, we're green. Okay, we don't have anything to work on. And I love our approach and your approach specifically with your team and the risk assessment. It's really given us things we can sink our teeth into, and we can walk back in that next meeting and say, hey, you got your priorities. Here are 5 things that we think we need to work on in the next 6 months to get you to move your program down the road in the positive direction.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can't jump straight into process improvement, right? Because you got to start with the foundation. So if you don't have the documentation, and we can't speak to the documentation and we don't know what's in it, we can't really help you improve your overall processes. So I think that foundational piece is key to what we do, and especially when we're starting a new engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask a question for you, Sammy Jo. I know you were going to ask me a question, but let me ask you a question. So when we think about a bank that we walk into, what does the day-to-day look like for banking operations when they're thinking about information security versus when they're thinking about cybersecurity?
Yeah, that's a good question. With information security, it's, take vendor management, for example. How do we vet our vendors? Some organizations are still working off of a spreadsheet, and that's not good or bad. It's just that's the way they've always done it. And that's the way they've chose to continue to do it. But with the regulation changes and the emphasis that they've put around third-party risk management, it's hard to check all the regulation boxes working off of a spreadsheet. So, there's a lot of different tools out there that can be used for vendor management. I know, we've talked a lot about tools, and just not buying a tool is not going to fix it. And that is still the case with vendor management. But it gives you a starting point. It gives you kind of that framework of how do we risk rate our vendors? Are we really asking the questions of, what information do they have access to? What are they hosting for us? How critical are they to our day-to-day operations? So that's one thing that we're seeing kind of day-to-day when it comes to information security. We're also looking at, or we've had a lot of questions here lately on the process of employee onboarding and offboarding.
Yes.
Which is a big one, which also goes into the user access review component, which again is another process, another procedure, and both are procedures, right? But we have to figure out, what have we done and what can we do? What is feasible? What is realistic? And if it's not quarterly reviews, then we shouldn't put that in our documentation and hold ourselves to quarterly reviews. So let's at least create that baseline, and ask ourselves those questions so that we can improve our processes.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, Sammy Jo, because how many times have we walked into an organization and we read their documentation and their policy says we're going to do X on Y frequency. And then we go say, well, let's see, when's the last time you did it? It says you do it quarterly. Oh, we did it last fall. Oh, well, we do it once a year, and our auditors have never asked us about it. Yeah, but your paperwork says you're going to do it once a quarter, and so somebody's going to smack you over the head one day with that piece of paper. And you'd rather it be us, your internal partner, than your FDIC or your OCC examiner, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that's where my head goes when I'm thinking about information security and what that actually looks like with day to day. On the cybersecurity side, it could be as simple as, are our systems patched?
Yep, it sounds simple, but it's not, right?
Right. Are all of our, security tools on our devices? And when I say that, I mean our antivirus, our endpoint detection, our encryption. Are we checking these things periodically? Do we have a good pulse on what is actually on our devices?
Well, do you even know which devices you have? Do you have a good asset inventory, right? How many computers,
exactly.
laptops, whatever that is, and who has them? Where are they?
Yep. And I think at the end of the day, it's important for organizations to understand both information security and cybersecurity, but also understand some of the questions they should be asking themselves, right? On both sides, because it's important that you have a good asset list, that you understand what's on those devices, that you're periodically checking those things, but that, what do they have access to?
Exactly.
So both sides of the house there.
So because it is Cybersecurity Month, Cybersecurity Awareness Month, I guess, let me kind of bring this home for us and land the plane for Selena on what should the banks be focusing on this month. So I guess a couple of things I would tell people. First and foremost, make sure you have an excellent training program for your employees. I think one of the first things that we see in a lot of organizations is, oh, we do our quarterly phishing testing. Okay, well, so what was the result? Oh, well, only 10% of our people fail on a regular basis. And, it says the industry average is 15. So we're doing great, right? I'm like, it just makes me hurt my head. Sammy Jo was on a call with me, I think recently, or she may not have been on the call and I told her about it, but we were on a board level committee meeting with a bank and we were chastising them. And it's not a Kentucky bank, by the way, I will say that definitively, but we were chastising them about their high phishing failure rate and just a very high rate. And we were very concerned about it on a consistent basis. And I had been kind of on my soapbox. And finally, the CEO of the company said to me in front of everybody, he said, well, Milton, he said, what if these were real events? How would we be treating it differently? And I looked at him into the camera and I said, well, first off, you wouldn't be asking me that question because you would have fired me a year ago. I said, that's how serious this is. You would be talking to somebody else. And so I need you guys to understand this is a critical issue. We don't want zero failures because that probably tells us our testing's not good enough. But at the same time, we want zero failures. Which means when someone is not passing a phishing test consistently, there need to be ramifications. And those ramifications don't need to be you're fired. But it needs to be taken seriously, not like, oh, I should have caught that. I should have been better at that. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox a little bit. But when we walk into an organization and we see that their people part of the process isn't being taken as seriously as we'd like to see it, focus on training, focus on testing, and then following up with those people and putting them back through additional training if they need it. I know that bankers have to go through a ton of training that has nothing to do with cybersecurity. And the last thing that most people want to do is spend 15 or 20 more minutes a month going through training, but it is mission critical. So that's a big one for me. Another big one for me, and Sammy Jo, we've done a bunch of these in the last month. We've got a bunch more coming up, is testing your incident response plan, right? So how many times do we come into an organization where they actually have a pretty good plan, or we've helped them write a really good plan and we get there, but then we can't necessarily always get the buy-in to do the testing. And then when they do the testing, we can't always get the buy-in to get the right people in the room. And so I think if I'm going to pat us on the back and pat you on the back specifically, Sammy Jo, you've done a really good job in your team this year specifically of getting our banking clients to bring in executive leadership and middle management to go through these scenarios and really understand how do we respond when something happens. And guess what? We're talking Cybersecurity Awareness Month. It can be a cybersecurity event, but not all events are cybersecurity events. We still have to deal with them. You can have, a critical third-party vendor could have a massive outage, and your system could be down for a day or 2 days. How do you deal with that? That's a great exercise to put your management team through. You would respond in much the same way as you would in a cybersecurity event at the management level, right? IT is going to react differently behind the scenes. Information security is going to react different. But the management folks are going to largely have to solve the same problem. How do I communicate internally and externally? And how do I serve my customers while we're repairing systems, whether it's a critical cybersecurity event or whether it's just a system that's broken? So any thoughts on that, Sammy Jo? Anything you would add from cybersecurity awareness?
I think you've covered it. The biggest piece, and we have said it time and time again, it's the people. And so, I agree with you 100%. You've got to have a good training program. You've got to be testing your users. And it's not to catch people, right? It's not to see how many clicks and who's clicking and what. It's just to identify that risk. Because at the end of the day, the biggest risk any organization has, it's the human component. It's the human risk. And so the more we can train, the better off we are in protecting ourselves from risk.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we wrap up, Sammy Jo, what's one thing you would want our Kentucky bankers to remember about the distinction between information security and cybersecurity?
Yeah, I would say both information security and cybersecurity are essential. It's essential to have the right people in the room, having those conversations on a regular cadence. It helps both the IT teams. It also helps just the people writing the documentation, understanding what changes, what projects, what things we have going on. And with the right partner or partners in some cases, you can build a comprehensive program to address both. And that's the key. That's what we're trying to achieve. We want to have a solid, comprehensive information security program that touches on all aspects of information security, including that cybersecurity component.
Yeah, outstanding. Sammy Jo, thanks so much for breaking this down with me today. And Selena, I'll kick it back over to you. And thanks to our Kentucky bankers.
Thank you, Milton and Sammy Jo, for just exceptional information. And I'm just going to summarize it by saying, oh my gosh, ImageQuest can help our bankers sleep better at night. They just need to contact you, right? So on KBA's website, please go to kybanks.com. We have more information on ImageQuest with the contact information so you can reach out to them. And until next time, this podcast is a wrap. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for being with us.